That Friday night was the most intense and unforgettable of my life. The house was so calm and peaceful that a rare sense of tranquility settled over me. I was exhausted after a long week, and I wanted only one thing: sleep. As I drifted off, I thought nothing could disturb the calm. I had been a single mother for 4 years since my divorce. My ex-husband and I didn't have a bad relationship. We had simply grown apart. Raising my son Jerry alone had been the most rewarding and the most difficult thing I had ever done. He was everything to me: smart, funny, and kind. But being both his mother and father was a real challenge. That night, I was so tired, I barely had the strength to put on my pajamas before collapsing on the bed. The house was silent. Jerry had gone to bed hours earlier, after playing video games and doing his homework. Finally, I had a moment to myself, and in my room, the moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting soft shadows on the walls. I snuggled under the covers, savoring the moment and letting my mind wander. Life had been quiet lately, a welcome change after a difficult year. Jerry and I had been through a lot together since his father left, but we had managed to build a good life. Even though he was almost 22, we were still very close. He was always attentive and considerate. Sometimes I worried he took on too much responsibility for his age. I smiled, thinking of him. He was so kind, and I was lucky to have him in my life. But tonight, I was too tired to think. I was heavy and drowsy. Then I heard a light knock on my bedroom door. I half woke, thinking I was dreaming. But there was another gentle knock, and I was fully awake. "Mom," said Jerry, his voice soft but loud enough to rouse me. I blinked, trying to focus on the door. I could make out his silhouette in the dim hallway light. I sat up, trying to wake up completely. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice still shaky with sleep. He hesitated before entering the room and gently closed the door behind him. He seemed hesitant to come closer. "I couldn't sleep," he said. His gaze was fixed on the floor as he stood near the bed. Lying there, I could see that something was bothering him. Since the divorce, Jerry sometimes had trouble sleeping, but he rarely talked about it. I knew his father had hurt him more than he let on, and tonight I saw the sadness in his eyes. "Come here," I said softly, patting the empty space next to me on the bed. "You can stay with me tonight if you want." He hesitated a moment, then approached and lay down next to me. He was lying on his side facing me, and in the low light, I could see how tired he looked. He also seemed vulnerable, which was unusual for him. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. Jerry shook his head, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "No, I just wanted to be near you, Mom." It had been a long time since Jerry had wanted to be close to me like this, like when he was younger. I reached out and brushed his hair from his forehead. He smiled. "Okay," I whispered, placing my hand on his shoulder. "You can stay as long as you need." He smiled back, but I could tell something was troubling him, something he didn't want to talk about. I didn't press him. Instead, I lay back down, pulling the blanket over us both, and let the silence envelop us. We stayed like that for a while, savoring the calm. Jerry's exhalations slowed, and I thought he had fallen asleep, but he spoke again so softly, I could barely hear him. "Mom, do you miss Dad sometimes?" His question surprised me, but I knew he was talking about his father. It was a question I had avoided for years, one I didn't really know how to answer. "Sometimes," I admitted quietly. "But things didn't work out between us. Jerry, you know that," I said. But I sensed he wanted to know more. "Do you think things could have been different?" he asked. I sighed, thinking of my regrets. That's in the past, I replied. We can't change what happened. We have to move forward. Jerry looked down, playing with the edge of the blanket. I guess I'm just asking. Your father made his own choices. It wasn't about you. It was his decision, and it was never your responsibility. You have always been more than enough for me, Jerry, I whispered, my voice full of love and comfort. You mean the world to me. He rested his head against my shoulder, but I couldn't soothe all his anguish, the weight of years of pain and unspoken guilt. We fell silent. The silence between us acted like a balm, comforting him little by little. His frame relaxed, his exhalations deepened, and he fell asleep peacefully. But as he slept beside me, my thoughts raced and memories swirled in the darkness. We were both marked, and yet, in the sweetness of that shared moment, an unexpected, clear-throat sensation was born in me, indefinable. It was a diffuse awareness that washed over me, a connection that seemed deeper than the usual bond between a mother and her son. I tried to ignore it. I turned to focus on the rhythm of his exhalations, but it persisted, a stubborn whisper that refused to be ignored. Morning came too quickly, the soft light of dawn bathing the room in a delicate hue. Jerry slept deeply beside me, his face peaceful and relaxed, as if the tension from the night before had dissipated. I watched him for a moment, my heart swelling with love and pride. Yet that unusual, persistent awareness remained. An undercurrent mingled with my maternal affection. I got up gently, careful not to wake him, and went down to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The familiar routine of the kitchen offered a semblance of normality, but my thoughts kept returning to our conversation. Jerry had always been sensitive, but I hadn't realized how much he had internalized his father's absence, the guilt he carried, a burden I desperately wanted to lighten. But it wasn't just that conversation that troubled me. It was the way he had looked at me, the vulnerability in his eyes, the unspoken desire for something more. If I was honest with myself, what I had known holding him close had awakened something deep within me, a bond that seemed to transcend maternal instinct. I tried to push the thought away. I focused on the pancakes cooking in the pan. He's just a child, I told myself. But the thought persisted, a persistent murmur that refused to be silent. Soon after, Jerry appeared, still sleepy, his hair disheveled, a picture of youthful innocence. Yet in his eyes, I perceived a new maturity, a glimpse of the young man he was becoming. I greeted him with a smile, trying to conceal the emotions that had remained since the night before. "Good morning. Did you sleep?" I said, placing a plate of golden pancakes in front of him. "Morning," he murmured, settling at the table and beginning his breakfast with relish. We ate in silence, the morning sun bathing the kitchen in a soft light. I knew his gaze on me for a moment, but I remained silent, hesitant to breach the complexity of the previous night's emotions. He seemed more relaxed, more himself, and I didn't want to disturb that fragile peace. Finally, Jerry broke the silence, his voice sincere. "Thank you for last night, Mom. I needed that." His vulnerability surprised me. "You never have to thank me, Jerry," I reassured him. "I'll always be here for you, no matter what." He nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on me, something unspoken hanging in the air. His eyes held a new intensity, a depth that transcended the simple mother-son relationship. The day passed without notable incident. Jerry retreated to his room, absorbed in his homework and video games, while I attended to household chores. Yet something in the atmosphere between us had subtly changed. It was an intangible transformation, a silent tension, a tacit recognition of a deeper bond that had emerged at dusk. As night fell, my thoughts kept returning to Jerry, to his transformation from child to young man, to the moment we had shared the night before. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that for me, this awareness had transcended the boundaries of maternal love. That evening after dinner, we settled on the couch to watch a movie. The room was dimly lit. Images flickered on the screen, casting shadows on the walls. We stayed mostly silent, at ease in the simple presence of the other. But as the film progressed, I became increasingly aware of his proximity, of how his arm brushed against mine. With every movement, my heart raced, and I tried to focus on the movie, but the tension between us was palpable, a silent symphony of unexpressed emotion. Midway through the film, Jerry moved closer, his arm pressed against mine. This time, he didn't move away. The contact of his skin against mine sent a shiver of awareness through my whole being. I turned my head toward him, and our eyes met. In his eyes, I saw a new intensity, the reflection of an emotion I had tried to suppress all day. I reached out and took his hand, our fingers intertwined. He didn't resist. Instead, it created a world that belonged only to us. Day after day, this bond grew stronger, became more tangible. The conflict I had initially known was replaced by a sense of rightness, the certainty that this was exactly where I was meant to be. Jerry was no longer just my son. He was my partner, my confidant, my everything. It was on a late autumn afternoon, after 9 p.m., that I fully realized the strength of our bond. The sky was covered with stormy gray clouds, and the rain tapped softly against the windows, creating a gentle melody. Jerry and I were snuggled together on the living room couch. A fire crackled cheerfully in the fireplace, spreading a comforting warmth through the room. We lay down, wrapped in a blanket. The heat from the fire and our closeness isolated us from the storm outside. Jerry leaned against me, his head resting on my shoulder. I absently ran my fingers through his hair, savoring the simplicity of the moment. Raindrops blurred the view through the windows, turning the outside world into an abstract, isolated canvas. I heard his slow, steady exhalations, and I knew, without him needing to say a word, that he was also aware of this change in our relationship, this tension, this silent truth that had settled between us. Jerry lifted his head, his gaze meeting mine, and in an instant, everything became clear. This wasn't just love. It was a connection that transcended the traditional roles we had always played. It was a bond that had evolved into something deeper, undeniable. "Mom," he murmured, his voice heavy with emotion. I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue, knowing these words would change our reality. "I love you," he said, his hand seeking mine. "Not just because you're my mother, but for everything you are. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I can't help it." Those words washed over me like a wave, filling the room with a love so intense, my heart raced. I knew what he meant, but hearing him say it out loud, perceiving the depth of his emotion, made it all the more real. "I know," I whispered. "Jerry," I breathed, my voice trembling. "I love you too. I always have. But this is different." He nodded sharply, his gaze searching mine, seeking reassurance, an answer to the unspoken question hanging between us. "I don't know what this means," I continued softly. "In some way, and it's not wrong, A faint smile lit up his face, and my heart overflowed with a joy I had never known before. "I'm glad you know that," he murmured. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't." I raised my hand to caress his cheek, my thumb stroking the skin beneath. "We'll find a way," I reassured him. Together, we stayed silent for a moment, our gazes fixed on one another as the fire crackled softly in the background. Words were superfluous. We had already said everything. We both knew what we were, and we knew it was real, undeniable. Slowly, Jerry leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine, and gently, hesitantly, he closed the distance, his mouth meeting mine in a gesture filled with all the love and restraint we had held inside for so long. There was no urgency, no rush, only a pure and sincere expression of our deep bond. When he pulled back, his eyes were filled with emotion, and I knew we had just crossed a line, a point of no return. But instead of fear, I was overwhelmed by a deep peace, the certainty that this was where we were meant to be. He gently took me in his arms, his hands encircling my back, and I snuggled against him, listening to the steady rhythm within him. The fire illuminated the room with a soft glow, sanctifying the moment. The outside world no longer mattered. We were alone in this universe we had created, wrapped in infinite tenderness. The evening stretched on like a gentle mist, punctuated by light caresses and delicate whispered conversations. We didn't talk about the future or the implications of this new dimension of our relationship. Only the present mattered, sharing this suspended moment as the rain continued its gentle melody against the windows. I was amazed at how quickly our bond had evolved. Jerry was no longer the boy I had raised. He had become a man, and in that, our relationship had taken an unexpected but beautiful shape. That night, Jerry came back to my room. This time, he didn't hesitate. He slipped into the bed next to me. His arms enveloped me, drawing me near. This wasn't the agitation of a son seeking comfort from his mother. It was the embrace of two souls united as equals. I rested my head on him, listening to the soothing rhythm within, a symphony of serenity. I knew a peace I hadn't known in years, a wholeness I hadn't even thought to seek. No matter what this relationship had become, I was ready to accept it. Jerry and I had always been close, but now we were more than that. Something that defied convention, but in our eyes seemed perfectly right.